I'm afraid of going there in class.
Le premier collègue qui a pris la parole m'a traité d'antisémite.
There have been attempts to expel people from their educational programs.
This medical student at McGill University agreed to speak to us only if we protected her identity. She says she's been told by doctors in her program that she could suffer severe consequences if she condemns, for example, the bombing of hospitals in Gaza or the killing of healthcare workers by Israeli forces.
I could, easily face a suspension if I were to speak out publicly, because I have been told that there is influence by donors when it comes to our programming.
And she's not alone. We've talked to about 10 students, residents, and doctors in a number of programs and universities in Quebec and Ontario. Many told us they have been warned they could be suspended or expelled if they criticize Israel's attacks on Gaza. They feel they are victims of prejudice because for them, advocating for access to health care is a duty of their Hippocratic oath.
It's incumbent on us. I don't know how we can talk about caring for people and treating them if they're going to be bombed in the very places where they're seeking care. And if we're not willing to preserve the sanctity, the safety of places of healthcare in one part of the world, what goes to say that any of us is safe anywhere?
I asked the student, why is it so important for her to talk openly about Gaza?
I don't think civilians should be killed and that Palestinians are human beings. And it's very scary to see how someone who looks like people that I care about is so dehumanized.
Threats of suspensions in the faculties of medicine are being taken seriously. Sources tell us at least 5 medical students have been suspended. And experienced doctors have suffered reprisals for criticizing the bombing of hospitals in Gaza. Dr. Yipen Jay, a resident at the University of Ottawa, was suspended for supporting the Palestinian cause on social media, calling Israel's actions apartheid and settler colonialism. He has since been reinstated, but these sanctions had a huge impact.
Il y a une censure qui est là, puis il y a aussi juste des silences, donc des autocensures aussi.
This pediatrician teaches at McGill University. He's one of the few physicians in Canada who openly criticizes Israel's attacks on Gaza. He's also critical of the intimidation he's observed in the medical establishment.
On vit dans un climat où n'importe quel propos qui vise à humaniser le peuple palestinien subit des représailles.
Dr. Shaheen Hussein says a few medical students have reached him to say they've been told by faculty members that if they're critical of Israel on their social media, they might not get their first choice of residency.
Ils ont peur d'avoir une carrière professionnelle qui va être amputée.
CBC News has obtained screenshots from this private Facebook group called Canadian Jewish Physicians. They talk about sharing the names of 271 students who signed the petition calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. One doctor writes, "Has anyone created a document of their names that can be shared with program directors as CARM's file reviews begin?" A few doctors request the list. The objective seems to be to influence the selection process of residents. In another screenshot, a program director at the University of Ottawa writes, "Can I have the list of names who signed?" The Faculty of Medicine of the university reacted by stating, "We promptly constituted a new and independent selection committee, and the selection process for the dermatology program was restarted." The program director immediately and voluntarily recused herself from the selection process. She has not been suspended.
Si c'est vrai que ce regroupement-là puisse avoir un impact sur les carrières professionnelles de ces étudiants, c'est grave. C'est très grave.
The Canadian Association of Medical Faculties has responded to these allegations. They say any attempts to intimidate or harass students will not be tolerated and will be the subject of an inquiry. Tensions on campuses are experienced differently by Jewish students and professors who feel targeted by hateful remarks and posters. The increase of anti-Semitic attacks on synagogues and Jewish schools in particular amplifies the insecurity. This professor at Concordia University asked that we protect her identity because she fears for her job.
It's difficult to find out that your colleagues support Hamas.
We spoke to a few Jewish students in Montreal who wouldn't agree to speak on camera, even anonymously. They are terrified of being recognized and harassed. This professor was horrified to find out that some of her students celebrated the October 7th massacres by Hamas. She had a hard time going back to school, and it's still difficult.
I'm afraid of reprisals. I'm afraid of being doxxed. I'm afraid for my physical safety. I'm afraid for the students who are also afraid. I'm afraid of being boycotted. Why should I not be able to walk from the front door to my office without having to hear a call for my death?
The professor believes her Jewish identity puts her in danger.
This isn't simply criticism of the Israeli state. It has evolved into an assault on Jews, and there's no separating them anymore. And it's very hard to find out that people you would have worked with are taking that position.
The most difficult thing for her is not knowing who to trust anymore. Colleagues who used to be allies are now anti-Israel and no longer talk to her.
I'm not happy about this war. I want to be clear, I'm not in favor of it. I have great compassion for what's happening in Gaza, but me and all the people here are also not responsible for it, but we're being held responsible. And we're being held responsible in these sorts of ways, through boycotting, through harassment.
The professor says her university has done little to nothing to make her feel safer, and she's not the only one. Class actions have been launched against 6 universities, including Concordia. Groups of Jewish students and teachers say these institutions are not doing enough to protect them against anti-Semitism on campus. We asked McGill and Concordia universities to respond to our report. They had no comment.
Sophie, this conversation is powerful. It's also very sad. Just watching it, I'm sure there are people out there who say that they could litigate the content of the conversation about the war, but that's not really the point here. This is about the climate on campus, this fear of saying absolutely anything. Can you tell us more about it?
Adrienne, I've rarely seen this level of anxiety and animosity on Montreal campuses. It's really surprising to see how students and professors are really scared to just talk about Israel and Gaza. I've tried for 2 months to convince people to talk to me on camera, people that are telling me disturbing stories of intimidation. Students tell me they're being harassed just because they're Jewish. They're terrified that things will get worse if they talk, even anonymously. On the other hand, I've had med students literally hanging up on me when I asked them if they were willing to talk on record, because they're convinced that if they talk publicly on Gaza, if they criticize Israel's attacks, the consequence will be immediate and terrible.
And so these are not hypothetical threats. You're talking about reprisals that are actually happening.
Yes, I know of at least 5 medical students in Ontario that have been suspended. One is even facing being expelled. I also know doctors who are facing right now complaints of anti-Semitism at Le Collège des Médecins and in Ontario also. So yes, med students and residents are very worried about their future if they talk or tweet about Gaza.
Sophie Langlois, as always, thank you.
Thank you.